but we wanted to have this presentation of some of the work that we were doing at the University of Barcelona in the framework also of the urban agenda and other projects that we're involved in, to kind of like continue and broaden kind of like this perspective on like indicators and urban food systems. Before Alessandra was presenting some of the frameworks that we have, like the city region, the Milan Pact, and the new one on climate and food. But we also thought it was important to kind of like see what is out there in terms of like how a city is measuring different objectives around environment, around social justice, and so on, and how that links to food, because it is a way of like actually trying to tap into how food relate to other areas of the city, which was the conversation we were having before, and that we think is also relevant. So Alessandra will give a very, hopefully like a relatively short overview of like how we've been looking at these like urban indicators, defining urban food systems as not only like food, but how food interacts with the urban. So that we have to look a bit beyond just like food activities to understand, for example, how levels of poverty are shaping and being shaped by food systems in urban areas. And in that sense, that might help us to think, we hope that this conversation might help us to think about what types of indicators, what types of topics we think would be relevant as a partnership to put forward for the European Commission to measure. I mean, to kind of like broaden up our perspective so that we find the synergies with other urban topics as well. So I have to warn you that this is complex, but we don't want you to be kind of like just focusing on all these specific indicators, but it's mostly about like joining us in broadening up this perspective so that how urban food can support like transformations beyond, just the food system.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So Anna summarized it very well. So don't be scared. It's not like that you have to understand every little particular, but you have to understand, you should understand, I mean, the meaning of this, of what we are going to present, and to read it in the framework of what the Urban Agenda Partnership also want to launch and to propose at the European level, etc. So I will go through a bit of the objectives, both of the action of the Urban Agenda around indicators and of the framework elaborated and proposed in development by the University of Barcelona, our group. Then like a bit how we got a bit to this indicators framework is not like it's like the product of a path that has led to nowadays. And then I will go through into what are these layers and indicators that the framework proposes, and then we can have some collective discussion and also a bit of guided feedback, from your side on what you think about this presentation, and also more broadly to like the session that we had. So the action number 6 on indicators of the urban agenda aims at identifying a few common indicators to monitor urban food systems that can be widely used or can be also proposed to the European level. For instance, introducing a module on urban food or food in statistics of cities at the EU level, in EU level statistics. And we go back to the definition that we used in the first presentation, to this purpose, that we said that monitoring is a process of producing and retrieving and assessing relevant data that speak about the urban system and the food system to inform policy formulation, progress, action, etc. So in this, the key goal of the project and the framework that we present now is to really incorporate both food-related and non-food indicator about urban and urban sustainability that connect food with broader urban dynamics that we call socio-ecological layers of diverse cities, in order to this siloing food action, we could say, to link food system assessment with key social, ecological, and economic urban trends. Now, the process of elaborating a bit this idea came from prior research, like of the University of Barcelona, and at the time I was not present, but was conducted by other researchers together with Anna and the group around 2003, 2023, 24, a first phase of reviewing what is out there, so including the monitoring framework that we viewed in the first presentation, so the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact, the city region food systems, and other indicators around urban sustainability, not only food system, but also urban. So reviewing what is out there and coming up with a list of potential indicators for operationalization and organized into these layers and dimension. Then there was a second stage of applying this broad corpus of indicators to Spanish cities to see what information is available, what was difficult to retrieve, etc. So shrinking a bit this set of indicators toward a lower number in order to have sort out what indicators are a bit more retrievable. And then there was a consultation process in which some experts from around Europe participated, including Joy Carey and others, a Delphi survey in 2 rounds, where at the final stage of this Delphi survey, there was a set of 69 indicators, core indicators selected, and other aspirational were called indicators that could be potentially also added. So this is a bit the process, and the current stage of the group, and also as part of the partnership, is to really expand the analysis of this indicator to more cities in Europe, to refine this set of indicators and propose essential core indicators also for the work of the urban agenda. But now, coming to a bit the core of the issue, what this direction of travel or impact areas that we have chosen and proposed in this integrated framework, what are they? So they relate to key socio-ecological layers and dimensions of the city and of food systems that we summarize into these 5 ones, no? The socio-ecological area or of social justice, environment, climate, and metabolism, economy, urban infrastructure and morphology, and governance. Now, I will lead you to each of them, like not like being very, very systematic and detailed, but just to give you a sense of why and what they encompass. So the area, of social justice basically encompasses the aspect of course, like population at risk of poverty, the aspect of food insecurity, that are essential. Of course, dimensions and indicators to measure, they are essential because they are essential component of a social justice dimension. But they are also tricky because we know that this kind of information is not always retrievable everywhere at the urban level with the same level of detail. It varies very much from context, from countries, and also from regional and local context. So it's essential, but also tricky. So in this sense, these are type of indicators that from which we can build an argument also at a higher scale to help local authorities really to retrieve, to being more capable of retrieving this data and having like more support information in this sense. There are also, in the social justice area, there are indicators that are related more to urban aspect of demography, like population change, and also the distribution of household income. This type of information and indicators are often very much more retrievable, or like that municipalities have generally this data, and they can use in correlation be used in correlation with more food-related data to help to structure certain interventions. I give you the example here of the Brussels capital region. It's a context that I know a bit more, but it's very indicative in this sense. This is the map of the Brussels capital region, where they have very good statistics about income distribution, like regional statistics. They are quite good in Brussels, and you can see income distribution per neighborhood. So there are from a lower income to a higher income. Brussels is a region in which people with lower income tend to concentrate in the center, and people with higher income tend to concentrate partially in the center, but also in peripheral, most of all in peripheral areas. So, and you have this double dynamic of a high, a hub of a high influx of high income population, largely concentrated in specific districts, and at the same time, a high amount of lower income inhabitants and migrants with also a very clear spatial structure. And the level of incidence of poverty in the regional area is quite high. The threshold of 37.2% is quite high with respect to the average of like a regional and local context in Europe. So there is a whole area of work here around this and the quality and how this condition the quality and diversity of food environment, the distribution of conventional versus alternative food retail options in the region. So to connect these dynamics with food environment. So this is the example around social justice. Then the other aspect, important aspect around environment, climate, and urban metabolism. So the strategic connection of food with land, greening, and biodiversity. Not only because data around green areas, for instance, per capita or surface areas designated for natural protection, these are usually or more and more available data, but also because this strategic role that greening and biodiversity is and biodiversity policies and greening policies are playing for cities. This is a recent studies on cities that have been activating greening plans. What are the cities in Europe a bit more active in this sense? So there is a whole area of work of aligning food with greening action and plans. For instance, instigating productive nature-based solutions, reinforcing argument around the support for agroecology and bioregional approaches. So the connection with this area of work. Certainly, climate also encompasses retrieving data about the level of the environmental impact of food production and also the other activities of the food system and chain. So here it's a bit tricky sometimes and not always easy to find data. So this could be also an argument for the EU level or for other scales, higher scales, to how to help cities in work on this line, on monitoring and understanding more and more what is the environmental impact at the local level of certain like sectors and activities of the food supply chain. The aspect of economy, I give you just one example. It's about linking food with key drivers of the economy and food environments in cities. So here the key example is, for instance, the relative contribution of tourists to the municipality's economy, and also the indicator about whether tourist companies actively taking measures to source local, sustainable and fair trade food. So tourism as one of the key economic drivers of many European cities, including Barcelona. Like we know that tourism is a driving economic sector around in Barcelona. It gives many jobs and it's also a quite large share of the city's employment as I said. And it's a vector for transforming also the food environment. Food and drink account for the largest shares of tourist expenditure. And also in a study done by the project, by this project and the group of University of Barcelona and other collaborators, it came out how these food swamp, so areas with easy access to unhealthy food, mostly, or there is an intersectional correlation between the most touristified areas and the most historical central area of Barcelona, with the high presence of this food swamp. So there is a whole area of work on the incidence of on food economy and food environment of these dynamics, and also on the other side on tourism as a possible lever for more sustainable food retail and consumption practices. So this is another key example of how you can link a key driver of the economy of the city to key food dynamics and vice versa. Almost finally, like the aspect of urban infrastructure and morphology is very important, because like it leads us to connect key aspect of land use and of course of urban connectivity. So how like the urban density, how public transport is more or less used in the city, how a city is connected with like how easy is access food is accessible, no? And so it invites us to connect food with key planning policies around land use and transport. So this is our just aspect to give you an examples around that. So this is the logic a bit that we work with. So, and the aspect of governance, of course, very important, very important to understand what is the strength and the capacity of the public sector in the city compared to other sectors. So, for instance, what share of the municipality budget is devoted to food planning and policy structures? What is the municipal support for key food market or retail stores? So the strength of the public sector, and also the importance of food as the presence of food and integration of food in other policies around climate, we said, health or social services. And finally, the commitment in the area of food procurement and the embedding of food procurement criteria. So this is a basic, like, an overview, but you don't have to, I went to some detail, but you don't have to retain every detail, but it is more the sense of it and the logic that tie things together and motivate the choice of certain indicators and the areas to look at. Now, yes, this is a bit an introduction also to collective discussion, because the idea is that this is preparatory work really for providing the key policy brief and messages from the urban agenda to the European level. So we thought that we could share our ideas in light of this presentation. On the one hand, what is important to be monitored and measured? What makes sense? Is there anything that resonates to your sensitivity and to your ideas about that, of what has been presented, of these different target areas and the indicators, or there are things missing that you think are important to underline? First of all, so choice of essential indicator, and second, what could be proposed to national and the EU level? So, for instance, in the presentation, we mentioned the importance of having more access to certain statistics around food in the general city statistics. So this is something that we could tell for sure at the European level, so, for instance, around social justice on the one hand, or environmental climate impact indicators on the other. And also, they need to provide stable framework for cities, not only for food policies, but also for monitoring, alongside with them. So this is a bit the invitation now, and we thought also to give you this sort of template physically also, not so that you can take a bit of time, take a bit of time to write something, like, and without having the pressure of like saying something immediately, but you can reflect a bit, also, and take time to write something, and then maybe we can let 5-10 minutes, then we can open a bit the discussion, and then you can keep also with you this this thing and for later.
I think what we can do is, I mean, if there are questions for Alessandra, no, I think what she has just presented, we can start with questions. We wanted to give you that template because we know that this is highly complex, so maybe you need to write down some things and then you can give them to us so that we can collect them. So first, if there's questions to Alessandra, and then we'll start a collective discussion. Does anybody have any questions on what she presented around these indicators?
I have a question. We also want to ask you some indicators of constantly. I have some with the CAP about the European perspective. We are facing the fact that the European perspective didn't take in time the association that are public security is now very good. The effect is they can't either logistic, cheap logistic, and distributing less products because of that. The delay of payment is during from 3-4 years. This is like for one structure, 3 million in parallel. I see the beginning of the association, and this delay have a great impact on the territory because of the building situation. This is one example, but we have also an example of the the agricultural system for the industry, what they are doing, what they are processing, which products does it from. This is indicators and data we don't access. And for us, it is really to assess the degree of complexity of the system, and we don't have access to this. So I have many demands.
No, but I think this is part of the what is said in terms of like maybe demands or needs. There were two parts of like if we have like a specific indicators that we want to collect as cities working on food, and then the part of demands. And I think we need to take this opportunity to kind of like collect all of these demands and then make it into something that we feel that it can have some response. There's also the joint research center is developing some indicators at the European level for food systems, and they are kind of like collecting some data there. But there are things that are not there also because of the difficulty to collecting data, that some data is held by companies and it's very difficult to kind of like know. So that's kind of like, I think, but we can articulate it in different ways of like, this is the type of data that we need, or we need kind of like that there's a, that there are mechanisms to provide data on the food system that is held by companies, so that the European Commission kind of like maybe kind of like activates something around that, or but this is the idea, to collect all these different types of needs.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
If there are no questions for Alessandra, we can give a couple of minutes to think, but then we'll go kind of like into a more guided kind of like conversation around these two topics. So that we can...
Yeah. This year. WhatsApp. Ah, sì, su Teams. Mm. Sì, prima che ti manda un link perché otra persona me ha escrito del mi robot, ha escrito otras opiniones sobre necesidades, sobre vale. ¿Eh? Ah, un minuto más. No, dico per dare il tempo alle persone per fino a un quarto d'ora, una cosa del genere. Oh.
Because tomorrow also we have a slot to talk about actions. So
Really?
and then we have to we can also have a follow-up.
Ah, ok, ok.
Che era quello dove anche le altre città avevano scritto dei che altro era le due domande di oggi, non ho bisogno, quindi ne sono qua, non so se ci può essere qualche spunto, essere uno, due, il terzo punto. Però mi sembra che su alcuni avevano evidenziato anche dei fabbisogni specifici.
Dov'è la mano?
Lì,
Ah.
per ingrandire più.
No, proprio sì.
Questo qua
Sì, sì.
Ricky qua ti fa la mano.
Ah, ecco, perfetto.
Ci sono anche altre città. Vedi, per esempio, evidenzia anche dei dati che manca.
Mhm.
No está. La buscaba, no es mirado, pues a ver.
Yeah, people are listening. Because you said that tomorrow there is also a slot to reflect on our
That week, I mean, I think it would be important to think about it basically. Well, I don't know what do you want to do. What are you proposing?
a feedback now on this.
Yes.
Maybe. I can. You want me to?
I think we should.
Right now. Hello. Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe we can now share some of the elements. So I think it would be interesting to have the discussion like in two blocks. First of all, it would be this idea that it was kind of like floating a bit around the room of like whether, and as part of one of the actions of the of this partnership within the urban agenda is like whether we want to propose a specific indicator in terms of like food and cities to be measured that is not measured currently, and if we want to kind of like put pressure for that to happen, as Alessandra was putting out there are indicators on environment or climate change like increasingly being taken up in terms of measuring progress in European cities, but there's not much or around food. So the first thing it would be to have like some input in terms of like what do you think would be most important to measure in cities in Europe around food in the context that we're right now, in what is happening in terms that it will help us with our work in cities. So it would be good to get some kind of like input in terms of like from the ground with the work that you're doing. What do you think would be an important indicator to have monitored in a constant manner, see progress and to help with your work? Yeah, of course. Yeah. It's open now. The floor is open for a bit of a discussion.
Yeah. Interviewing.
The plant-based consumption. I don't know by which end. You collect the data, but the food landscape is the subject of accessibility and local food the processing and logistics. Maybe system. So we will read some data to show us if we are going through the system, similar system on local food.
If anybody wants to react to that or ask for like specifics, this is now like an open kind of like conversation. So
I think that it's linked to what you mentioned about the consumption of plant-based. I think, of course, it is a complex conversation to have. It's very but we do not have a reliable source on what actually people think, or like even their position on these, rather than what they actually are able to do with their consumption pattern. Like I feel that on this topic, many times we rely on what the newspapers are saying, which can be very harmful for the topic. But of course, it is like knowing what people think about sustainable food outside, let's say, the participation to events or to things that are organized even by non very appealing organizations like City, for local authority, for more institutional corporate life situations, and not very pop situations where
Just to say that in Barcelona, when we were doing this exercise about proximity or the mission, the target was to that 60% of the population in 5 years is going to eat more local food. And we were trying to split that in indicators that were actually measurable and could tell us something about how people were walking through to eat more locally. And we identify data about perception, like people's perception about ecological and local. Many people don't even know the proximity. So I think it's a good point to, before measuring how many people is eating this type of food, perhaps what do people understand by different types of food, the perception. Because that's what's going to lead us to buy more of one or the other. They know what ecological is or what plant-based is. So perhaps barometers, can you see that? Like surveys about the perception of
It's a value on based on this. Because at first it was the people which were related of that conveys only soda snacks. So and then the need triggers food and not in the really a lot of steps of processing. Not these or outcomes and multi-user terms. So when we discovered the second step is surveys that the people are ready to but we didn't know that's like this is that's not sequence in a second. And the first that so we have to raise cultural friendship from this.
I think also, for me, one of the things that was very interesting when you were saying, and maybe we can go a bit deeper into it, is measuring food insecurity, because it was interesting when I think about measuring food insecurity. I think about this like lived experience of food insecurity, this PS scale that is about how many people cannot access enough food to have like a quality of life, but then you were talking about food insecurity before in a very different way, like thinking more kind of like crisis or kind of like being able to feed cities. So I think it would be, for me, like two things. It would be interesting to, every time there's more measurements around this PS scale that is about the perception, like how people are experiencing this lack of food and what are the levels of that in terms of like a social justice kind of like element to it. And then the other one is this one about like more, for me, more linked to like the vulnerability or the resilience of cities, which leads more to proximity. And I think it would be interesting to have the conversation about indicators, thinking about why are we asking for urban indicators and not kind of like another scale? What do we think is important for the cities, and how we kind of like make a case for like we need this in the urban space, this specific indicator. I think I've done a lot of questions, but anyway, that's what have been my reflection on like, yeah, where are we going with this? What could be kind of like some of the asks and what's relevant?
That I've just set up my silences. So. Sorry. I guess from my perspective, what I was thinking in terms of essential indicators is kind of twofold. So one part is what are the indicators that we can, or that are already there that we can relate. So rather than thinking about just specific indicators, more thinking, I guess, about how we can put several indicators together to tell a picture, you know, around data that's already there. So think about topics like food insecurity, what that looks like in one location is going to be very different to another location. So, you know, so thinking about actually how can we use some of the indicators that are already being measured in various ways, but maybe use them a bit differently. Because the other part of where my mind is kind of going is the scale at which we're talking about. So if we're talking about across the EU, you know, there's huge diversity there, but even within one country, as large as Spain, for example, what it looks like in one city might be very different from another, even within a city, you know, between different neighborhoods. So I think that, you know, it kind of goes well with what I said earlier by Ms. Joy, first about the need for local adaptability, you know, to be able to use these indicators in ways that meet local needs. So yeah, so like some of the things I was kind of thinking of then were just sort of, I guess, social deprivation indexes, you know, and how that data could be used with, for example, population density or the number of grocery stores within the proximity within that area. So actually, rather than, you know, using some of the available indicators, but in different ways to kind of piece together. That's not a great example, but you can kind of get maybe what I'm saying is that there's, you know, because there's a lot of data already being gathered, and I think, you know, I had it down, I'm not going to jump into the demands bit yet, but you know, the right hand side, there is a lot of data there, but there is big issues over ownership of data at present. But their national bodies are calculating things like national, you know, income budgets per household. You know, how can we use that data in a way that actually tells us a better picture about the food situation, I guess. Yeah. But I'm not sure if I have a definitive answer, but it's just
At one point related to the economy part, don't remember what stick we had your example, and it wasn't very.
But tourism, we gave the example of tourism.
That's a good example. Bit like what you just said, cities are very different, and locations are very different. By comparing our cities in Finland, it doesn't have the role of tourism as you have in Barcelona. Say. So probably there needs to be some kind of adjustment to the local needs of doing the indicators.
Yeah.
Some of them generic and some of them very, very specified related to the location. But coming to the economy part, I would say that I don't know if this could be measured, but talking about urban food system, then we probably talk about the whole flow from the production or from the field to the consumption consumers. And one good or probably challenging but interesting indicator could be some kind of economic equity throughout the food system. And what I'm trying to say is that, as we all know,
Today, it seems that the producers, farmers are not happy. So there's no profitability in doing that work that much overall. And also consumers, as we are complaining that prices are high. And something is happening in between. Then the question is that, could that be some kind of indicator for cities to know what is our ability to influence that? And that is a problem with bigger chance of being faced. That would be very interesting to put into pieces, but understand that why are people that makes their living throughout in the urban food system, are they all well and sound? I mean, are they happy what they are doing, or are they suffering? And if they are suffering, is there something that we can do to make the food system to be a good system to be part of? You understand?
Yes, right.
It's probably a bit too big as a whole fund. That could be very interesting to measure somehow, or have some kind of indicator. Because that's part of also social justice is in there, so it's not only.
Yeah.
Is urban food system something that doesn't have to be even for everyone, at least would be the survival. I don't know.
I was wondering how that relates to what you were saying before on the kind of like that kind of that indicator on kind of like the infrastructure that you were mentioning, because I don't know if you already have like an idea of what is that indicator like, what would you measure? But it is a bit linked to these kind of like different stages in the food chain.
I think we think a kind of legislation on the market, markets, I think that's because locally we have a lot of farmers who want this big plants say market which is using most all of things about which is franchise that are for me. For vegetables, there is a great chances that you are eating vegetable from the not the histories we have only 3% of food is because products are growing or and you have a lot with these plants they go to bridge okay you have in kind of problem there c'est donc so the markets for this funds or this subject on the other hand, we are starting to develop of global food system. In 6 months ago, my director did announced today we are seeing no doubt from agriculture, the potential of the development is kind of because that's one and we are pitching to develop other kind of function for other products. And maybe the balance between the plants processing all about the world and this initiative A way to design how to system the system. And the trend.
No, yeah, just looking.
I build on that because when I build on what you said with this issue, and I was thinking strictly for the indicators. Because you started from the idea that neither the producer or the consumers are happy. Can you explain a bit how the role of the retailers maybe?
The success of the retailers.
Yeah. I remember there is a academic paper that did a study on the Netherlands food system. I think it's around 10 years ago. I don't find it, but I remember the graphic. And they showed how dependent the Dutch system was on the big retailers. And that was a discussion at that time also in UK about Tesco, which everybody hated kind of, but everybody was dependent on. And to come back to the indicator, an indicator which is composite, more or less what you said a minute ago, and it goes on governance, social justice, and economy would be the degree the degree to which a city or let's say urban regional system is dependent on these retailers. So to what extent basically it's dependent on one that has enough power to say to the producer, you take half of the money, or I don't buy anything. And then the consumers, the price is double, but I'm the only one selling, so you will pay. And to what extent we can link basically the producer and consumers to avoid the intermediary and have less dependencies, more diversity and direct exchange on that side.
Space makes sense. This group, we have example in 18.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the challenge here is that, and maybe this is an exercise to do. I see indicators that are simply numbering things, so very brute indicators and composed indicators. What we're saying is already, if you say percentage of something, it's already a formula, so it's a composed one. It means several things that are put together and you conclude something. If you say how many producers I have, that's just numbering. So I think those two levels are important because I think first you need to collect the data, which is the brute indicator, 1, 2, 3, 4 farmers, and then the formula, it's more like analyzing and kind of, somebody said about telling the story with indicators. I mean, people want to know the story. For example, okay, we conclude we are dependent on Tesco and I don't know, Carrefour and so on, which is much more complex to do. And that's more like on the side of research, I think, your formula and stuff can come, but first collecting. And then, of course, you need to have the package of indicators, brute indicators, to make the formula, because if you have just 2 from 4, then you cannot make the formula because you're missing 2. So it's also strategically grouping and selecting groups of them that make sense for later, not just pieces that cannot tell the entire story.
Yeah, I think that like the things that you were talking about, for me, they are kind of like thinking about like resilience indicators, and that's one thing that is about like the link to local or regional food and how much food of that comes into the city. And another one is like which is also linked to show food supply chain. So this, I mean, which type of actors are in the system, because you might have like supermarkets selling local food or not, or you might have supermarkets just selling food from other places. So those are kind of like different things. I mean, in the case of the UK, I think it's 85% of the food comes through like 4 big supermarkets in the whole country. No, so but what I think I mean, I think those two indicators will be very interesting. I think the data for cities is like super complicated. Maybe in terms of like the supermarkets, it would be a bit easier for some cities that actually have like the codes of like the types of stores that they have. So they know the concentration of types of stores. So you know if you have more or less diversity. And in principle, more diversity equals more resilience because you don't have to go through just one or two actors, you have like more options. But yeah, what you were gonna say.
I think like one difficulty with this is like the density of supermarkets and other retail points or like shops is that the number doesn't tell you so much because it's like the volume, and this accessing the volume is always the difficulty. There's like no, because then I mean the same like it would be difficult. You have to see like the list shops are like the numbers much more, but then you don't know.
And you have to go to the panel, the consumption panel, where
Yeah.
it says that
And
how many
customers.
words they buy. Yeah, but that's not the national.
Yeah.
Bit further question, I'm not sure it's like within the scope. But yeah, so I'm not from the city, and like what I'm wondering is like what there is a network of cities can do in order to support with like creating synergies between different like sets of indicators, which looks what we discussed during the development roundtable, and how we can convey certain messages to the broader EU level. So how can we, because it's like, I find the discussion and also like during the development roundtables and the organized roundtable on indicators, especially in the Millennium Global Forum. And it was very interesting to hear about the different indicators and to kind of reflect on how these indicators can become more effective. But my question is, how can we then kind of take next step and create synergies between these indicators, communicate on these indicators, and also kind of make sure that then what we collect can get to other governance levels. So that the national level, but yeah, as you cities, and not more interested as like our scope of action is more related to the EU level.
Yeah, well, I think that's one of the key kind of like conversations and maybe outputs of this action within the partnership, like whether, because we've seen like the complexity and the of the landscape of indicators and how many places are doing many very interesting things, but it is difficult to see the aggregation because everybody's doing it a bit differently, no? And so I think one of the questions for your cities would be like, you're kind of like, you're very familiar with what's happening in cities and food in Europe. Is that kind of like a specific topic or like type of data that you think it would be interesting to push for like everybody to try to have that, or like many cities to have that, to kind of like show a picture and build a narrative around this is what's going on in cities, or these are some of the key challenges, and this is the data that backs it up. Because I think that's one of the things that we're missing. We don't have urban food data at the European level. I mean, we have something like what Dean was saying. We could kind of like put things together, but it would be social justice data, income data, like economic data, but we have such few kind of like points of like urban food data that is very difficult to say. It kind of like it dilutes the food dimension of it. It's just kind of like, so it's an aggregation of socioeconomic indicators in some ways. So this is a bit like, is there something that we can push that it would be like food related, that it would be unique, and that it would say like, we need to measure this in a more kind of like homogeneous way? Or is more like continuing doing things like in a diverse way and like trying to build a narrative? I think the challenge with that is that indicators are very specific, so it's very difficult to aggregate to things that are not exactly the same. Like if you're measuring food insecurity with this PSA scale, and another one is measuring as like the number of people that go to food banks, another one is measuring the picture is very difficult to pull together.
Indeed, to go in that direction has to be the most basic information. Like, for instance, how many children are eating at school per day compared to how many children are coming from families that are not, or in the percentage of the absolute poverty or like the one just above. But of course it has to be like observed in a geographical way, otherwise it's just a general number. But still you don't have this on a city base. Even just this. It's not even just a pure quantitative number. Still, it's not used. It's not easy to put together. What does having a meal at school means in each context? It's a very complex answer. And how do you assess if a family, or what is the percentage of families in poverty, blah blah blah. But still, maybe this is something that. It's still very complex. Sorry.
I feel that we're a bit stuck in the conversation because it's very complicated. So I just felt like I know that tomorrow we're gonna continue working on it, but I do think that it would be good to do some strategic thinking of like whether we think we can get till the end of this action with like maybe some big messages of like we need help to figure this out, like we cannot figure this out in this space, or like whether we think that we can arrive to a point where we can propose something more specific. And I think also, I mean, it's not only something that is happening in this group, but as you were saying, Kiara, is happening as well in your cities and in conversation with other spaces, that maybe there's something about when we think about the next steps of the action, of like whether there's something about, linking with also the spaces that are having these conversations and see how we can nail them down a bit more into the specifics of topics that are essential. Because I mean, I think it's quite clear there's not a clear indicator that we are dying to have in our cities because it's too complex. But maybe there's something that we can, either think about a process of how to do it, or like, on some like have some more specific topics.
I think that we to provide an answer to that, because I think we need that answer to decide how to to move forward, but really to build a strategy for 2026 for this action. Like, do we want to get to deliver the actual outcome, or do we want to bring on the process and see where it brings us? This, of course, it's based mainly on what you feel capable of, what you have the energy and the time, also because, but my only last take on this is that the work that RUAF developed for the Milan Pact relied completely on the pilot cities. So it can be a conversation with the cities in this group. It can be a conversation also with cities that we think are relevant and must be added to the conversation. Because in the group we have many cities, some are connected online, some are outside these conversations, they may not be that interested, blah, blah, blah. But that was the key, because otherwise it can be dispersed all over the place. All the framework, all the conceptualizations and models. If you have the same conversation with 100 people, 100 cities, then how can you find it? Like, it's based on how you do your research.
No,
but in their case, that worked very well. It was a very small group. Of course, they would have wanted a large one, but it was like 5 cities in the end.
I think there's a part of like the research, but there's also a part of like what is the demand from the cities? I mean, there's a part of like us collecting indicators and seeing where the gaps are and some of the elements, but there's also a part of like when making a proposal, what is the energy behind it, and not only the academic results that we might show you the
Of
same,
course,
like
yeah.
this, so there's, I think that that's the.
But if it like, if it's an issue to have just 5 representative cities of different contexts, different countries, different focuses also of the people that you're interacting with, because if you speak to Juliet, you will be speaking about food production more than if you speak to Andrea Magarini, you will be speaking about child guarantee and school meals. So
Yeah, it depends on the priority of the cities.
the city of the
Yeah, and
person that
context,
we
yeah.
really like for instance, when they work with Nairobi, they work with this officer, a wing president. Like it was the entry point. Of course, it has to be someone a bit strategic
Yeah.
to not have a completely biased. Like I only like food waste, and let's only work on food waste, and that's it. The only priority of European cities is food waste. Like, maybe that's not. But you don't need 100 cities to understand that. Like this group is quite representative in some ways. Also some that are not here present in the room. But still you can cherry pick based on the interest and the availability.
Well, maybe, I mean, I think maybe we can close this conversation here now, but I think there's something about the strategy of like, yeah, I mean, how to do the process in a way that it feels like whatever comes out as part of the partnership work feels kind of like that it has the backing of the partnership in that way. And I think it's about thinking of a process and also, yeah, maybe being aware that it will be kind of like pointing out to some key areas that need indicators and some examples, rather than having kind of like a tight proposal that is like, this is what it is. I don't know, Alessandra.
No, I think I mean we were thinking about now in this direction, like to ask or to propose what is needed, like what are
The specific needs.
what are the specific needs, etc. Yeah, like yeah, because you cannot solve everything, or you cannot answer to every contextual situation or need, of course, but maybe you can achieve something small, but that triggers that at least help in some sphere. Yeah, for instance, yeah, in the area around social justice, we already highlighted some needs, or even in the area around environment, like we highlighted really the need to have more, to include more data around food, more specifically within statistics around cities. So I think is propose 2 or 3 specific messages that can arrive to stakeholders. Yeah, some stakeholders. Like I wouldn't imagine, like, I don't know if you meant Elisa, like that we would do with our partnership framework what the Milan Urban Food Policy Pact did for the 3 pilot cities. No, or no. It depends.
If you say, I want to develop to establish what is the essential indicator in each of the 5
It's just,
elements, that can also be a way, but still either you go with the big surveys, big numbers,
Yeah. I don't know.
but then you lose all the qualitative aspect that you push for. But you have to be careful who you ask the question. Like today we have these cities because they are in the partnership and they were available to join us today. Maybe someone is missing, maybe someone that is not in the, like the partnership can give the framework, but still we can look for, I don't know, Paris or like these big committed cities that like if you speak to Copenhagen, you already know what the answer is. You're not. If you speak to one department, if you speak to another department, the answer is different, maybe different.
No, that is clear. I think that's a part of like, also collectively as a partnership, where do we want to go with this? Because I think indicators are so complicated that we did all the Delphi process with experts and a consultation and a convergence process. And even then you get to kind of like answers that are that you always feel like they're shaky, they are not that definitive. And as you say, depending who you ask, one department, the other. So that's kind of like, it's not that direct to just like ask people about this, because like knowing about indicators is complex and you have to get into the thick of it, and it's like very technical. So
to understand the actual need, then you go back to the technical. But if you want like fresh feedback on what is the need of city, like possibly nobody is in the position to actually give you a conclusive answer to the question from the city level, but on the need can be identified in a guided sort of exchange that is for sure possible. Like we did it in food trace. It didn't work out super well. But also because we had so many different inputs, implementation of like many, there was noise around this specific question. If you just focus on that, maybe the result maybe better slightly.
Okay. I'm aware that it's 6:10, so I mean it would be nice that you tell us in more detail about the food trails test.
Anyway, we'll have follow up tomorrow about this action, and we can reflect and share tomorrow our reflection and reflect what will be the output of the action.
Think about it. Yes. Let's well, anyway, it was useful. I mean, we collected a lot of things, and I think that are useful in the process of even developing this action. And tomorrow we can like reflect and like design some pathways to continue, to